Welcome to the Proptech podcast. It's Kylie Davis here, and I'm delighted to be your host as we explore the brave new world where technology and real estate collide. I passionately believe we need to share and grow a sense of community between the innovators and real estate agents, and sharing our stories is a great way to do that. Now, the aim of each episode is to introduce listeners to a Proptech innovator who is pushing the boundaries of what's possible, and explore the issues and challenges raised by the tech and how they can create amazing property experiences, especially in these strange and unusual times we're living in. Now, my guest in this episode is James Dearsley from Unissu. It's a global platform that helps real estate agents procure the best technology. Now, James is an international expert on Proptech and is based in the UK, which, as we all know, is a few weeks ahead of Australia on the COVID-19 curve. So I wanted to get his views on what the impact of the virus has been on the UK property market so far, and how he sees it affecting Proptech globally. Now, this is a pretty far-ranging interview and it goes a bit long, so sorry about that. We cover everything from how COVID-19 is making us reappreciate our homes and being home, the impact that it's going to have on the funding of Proptech, and James's fantastic vision for democratising access to education around technology. So here to share with us the future of Proptech in a post-COVID-19 world and force me to reveal some extraordinary secrets about my own past, James Dearsley, welcome to the Proptech podcast.
Thanks, Kylie. Good to be here.
Yeah, thank you.
So, after everything that's happened, we finally made it, even just to a webinar.
So this is an indication of the new normal, isn't it? Is that when you sent me the message to say that you had to cancel or postpone our second hookup that we tried to connect because you had to go shopping, it was completely legitimate, completely. And I read your message and just thought, fair enough. Like, that is truly a big deal right now. And I did the same thing this morning.
I've never had to do that before in my life, but I just went, I've got to go. 6 a.m. in the morning, I had to go to the shop because by 8 o'clock in the morning, they'd be all sold out and it'd all be gone. And there were a one in, one out policy. And I'm going, I've got to be honest, Kylie, I've gone shopping.
Yeah. No, completely understand. I did the same thing today and I came home with paper towel. It was like major victory.
It's mad, right?
Like winning the lotto.
It's a unique social experience, and no matter what we're about to talk about from a business perspective, these are fascinating times. And I tell you what, I would love to be sort of a young teenager looking at psychology and sociology and all the impacts on society and how we're changing and evolving and developing. And this is a unique experience which we will look back on when we come out the other side and just look at and analyze human behavior, which I think will be fascinating.
Well, you know how you do those memes and all that social stuff that goes on at the moment, where you look back at the 80s or the 90s or the 70s and you kind of joke about the hairstyles and all the kind of trends that were going on there. I just kind of throw forward and wonder how we're gonna be looking back at this time in that way. It's gonna make
toilet roll is going to be in there for sure.
It's going to make some great memes. But anyway, let's get back on track. So James, you are the CEO and founder of Unissu. Tell us about.
Yeah, I'm not clever enough to be the CEO, just to be clear.
Okay.
But I'm a co-founder and CCO of the business. Yeah.
Cool. Okay. And so, what's the Unissu elevator pitch?
So Unissu, it's a Proptech procurement platform. We recognise that there's a serious need for the real estate industry to be procuring technology solutions. And obviously that is a vast market. And we recognise there was no one really out there who had curated every single Proptech business around the world into one place and had the knowledge and the experience to enable the real estate industry to do that automatically and to find the right solution for their problem. Right. Too many people get doors knocked saying, we can solve your problems. Ultimately, we're the first people to actually say, no, let's reverse that. Let's have the property industry saying, this is the problem we have. Can you solve it? So we are the Proptech procurement platform.
Very cool. And so, look, where on earth does the name Unissu come from?
So my co-founder and I were very, very hungover, sitting in a cafe in the lovely south of France. And he will tell you that we just miraculously came up with a name because we were still probably slightly drunk. But in actual fact, in genuinely fact, we sat down and just said, look, what are we trying to do? And we listed a couple of sort of adjectives to pull it all together. And the first one we realized was that because no one had actually built a global database of Proptech companies to sort of start that journey into the procurement side, we needed to unite a load of different lists from all over the world. And there were venture capitalists who had their lists of businesses. There were Proptech associations who were fledgling at the time, who had their little sort of unique local lists. And we were uniting all of them together. The double S in the middle stands for being the single source of truth of Proptech data and information and research, which again was one of the things that we recognized there needed to be a global setup for somewhere to be the home for Proptech. And the U was probably the hardest bit of it all, which is when we were trying to unite all these different lists together and sort of build this database, there was no real uniformed structure of analysis. You couldn't compare an Aussie Proptech with an English with an Argentinian Proptech because everybody analysed Proptech completely differently. So we sort of started with a definition of what we felt Proptech was. We were very transparent about what we felt was and what wasn't. Co-working is not a Proptech business. Some people feel it is. It's a technology-enabled real estate business in our mind. And so that's really what it is. So it's uniting, single source, and uniformed.
Oh, that's really helpful. I might be able to spell it correctly now knowing that story.
with a double S, not a double U.
Yeah. I am guilty. I'm looking at my notes and going, oh, okay, better correct that. So look, let's talk about Proptech in the time of COVID-19. Now, you guys recently held the Future Connect webinar, like online TED Talk sort of events, and they were 100% digital. And for me, the first time that kind of COVID became real was when all of the events that were scheduled around that actually were cancelled.
Yeah, there's a conspiracy theory that Eddie and I invented COVID-19 just to prove that Connect could work.
I'm pretty sure Netflix, Zoom, and Facebook are in on it.
Yeah,
especially Zoom.
Oh man, Zoom is crazy, right? And the multiples of revenue they're trading at is nuts. But so just in that sense, Connect it's not really a Unissu thing. It's we've developed it to be deliberately non-Unissu, but it's a collaboration between us and at the minute 13 different partners around the world. We're looking to increase that to being sort of 25 to 30 partners, where we, as you say, we have keynote speakers like yourself, Kylie, going to film studios and recording keynote speeches, in the very highest quality, because we're just a big believer that you have to be able to democratize the ideas and share those ideas so that, somebody in the very southern tip of Chile or the very northern reaches of Finland has got the same access to the education and the content from this new wave of real estate models and technology that somebody in Paris or London or Sydney has got. Because ultimately, conferences are wonderful things, but I think they're ultimately elitist in the sense of they're very expensive. Even if you're in Sydney for a Sydney conference, the prices you pay for a conference are prohibitively high, especially for somebody who's new into the industry, and they've got to dedicate a lot of time and money to come and learn. And we just felt that it was fundamentally important that we democratize the access for those in the industry to access the very best speakers, but also at the same time, the likes of you, Kylie, who, I know how influential you are down under, and yet, probably somebody in Argentina has never necessarily heard of Kylie. And we wanted to make sure that, the ideas of people like you really got shared with others to give you a platform. So it's really Connect is a collaborative platform for speakers and partners to get global attention for their thoughts and ideas. And at the same time, democratizing that access so that it's free for everybody. That is absolutely fundamental. People must learn from others, irrespective of where they are in the world, because it's only when those ideas are shared does everybody, and this is the key point, the next entrepreneur in the property or Proptech space should be from the very southern tip of Chile. They shouldn't just be in an epicenter of New York, because that's where all the learning is coming from.
Yeah,
in this world of digital access, anybody anywhere should be the next entrepreneur, and that's what we want to try to facilitate, really.
Yeah, and it was great fun to be part of it, although I'm still too scared to watch my video. What?
How did you find it? Because it's hard.
I hated it. I hated it. So I am not. I love presenting on stage. I really struggle in front of a camera. I have a deeply traumatized teenage childhood story around being on camera, which I'll tell you another day.
Oh.
Yeah. Well, actually, I'll tell you now because our listeners will be wondering what's going on. But when I was 12 years old, when I was 12 years old, I loved singing like all young girls do. And I wanted to learn to sing. And there was a show called Young Talent Time, which was like kids on stage or kids would sing at this variety hour thing like you used to do in the sort of the early 80s. And
don't give that away.
No. Yeah, I'm just being careful there. And so what happened is that I went for an audition because they had a spot available, and I got through the first round, I got through the second round, I got through the third round, and they said I was going to do a screen test. And I was supremely confident. My mother was deeply unhappy with me for going. And it was a day in Melbourne when it would have been about 42 degrees. And being 12 years old and being very untrendy, they said, just wear casual clothes, like just, your jeans or something. Your jeans and a shirt. And I interpreted that very literally and went and borrowed a shirt of my mum's that was very see-through and wore jeans. And so when I got on camera, I was hot and sweaty and saw myself on camera and completely froze. And Danny Minogue got the gig. And that is a true story. So, yeah, I know. So I did have a little moment, James, in front of the camera where I just like, oh, God, what am I doing? Anyway, we shall move on.
I expected Connect to be a lot of things, but not a sort of a therapy session.
No, it wasn't. It was just a reliving of the trauma. There was no therapy.
But let me just say one thing, which I find fascinating. And I know this from, like you, Kylie, but, sort of being on the stage and speaking. And when you're on the stage speaking, you do get a sense of the audience and, you do enjoy the audience interaction. And you should be able to partake in sort of some banter to and fro with them. And you get a sense of how they feel you're doing as a speaker. So you're getting instant feedback. And obviously there's a vanity and an ego thing around that, of course. When you're dealing with a camera, it's a completely different sense because there's an openness and a vulnerability that you have as a speaker because you don't get that sense of instant feedback. Mm. So when you're on the stage, you can adapt and evolve what you're talking about. When you're doing to a camera, you can't. So unless you know your material completely, unless you're so comfortable in your knowledge and expertise about that particular topic, you get undone and nobody else does it other than you. Yep. You are the undoing of your expertise, and so that's why it's quite fascinating. And I think when Connect 2.0 comes out in October, with sort of hopefully 30 to 40 cities, depending on the number of partners we get, I think we'll see a massive ramp up in the style of the speeches and also in the quality of the actual speaking, because people will now see how others have been. Yeah. And hopefully not many of them will have haunted memories of being a 12-year-old.
Yeah, let's hope I'm catastrophizing. Anyway, but look, let's talk about COVID-19 and how you're seeing it play out on the global Proptech market. What are the trends that you're seeing? Or what do you see generally?
It's really tough because we're seeing, I'm speaking to a lot of Proptechs, obviously, as part of my day job. And I'm really seeing a mixed bag in the sense of you've got some Proptech businesses who've recently been funded and are therefore well capitalized and they've got product market fit. And as a consequence, they're scaling their business. They're in scale up mode and they are incredibly happy that they've escaped this catastrophe that we're seeing in front of us. And so, on the more mature side, when they're well capitalized, I'm seeing a lot of relief. I'm also seeing a lot of pain, and that's not restricted to a geography, a city, a technology. I'm seeing a lot of pain and worry and concern simply because in a lot of those cases, if a Proptech hasn't quite got product market fit yet, and they are still in that testing and iterating phase where they're trying to work out, they've got a cool piece of tech, but they haven't quite got that application yet. And so they're in that whole testing mode. there's a whole lot of pain around that because, suddenly not only is capital dried up, so, if businesses are in the middle of that fundraising period, there's just no capital for them. And if there is capital for them, there is a whole raft of very similar businesses in similar technologies going after that same bit of money, and the investors really in the driving seat there, if indeed they're deploying capital at all. So you've got one side, you've got the investors who are really have got the keys to the vault, and never more so than now. But on the other side, if you've got Proptechs who are actually quite well capitalized because they've run investment rounds, but they're still looking for product market fit, you've now got this slight quandary. And I say it's slight because on one hand, you've got the real estate market that's sort of ground to a halt a little bit. So if they're trying to work on tests or run feasibility studies with real estate firms, the real estate firms just aren't trading. And as a consequence, it's very difficult for them to get those testing sessions out. But the sort of the silver lining on that is a lot of these real estate people who perhaps some of these Proptech companies are looking to interact with or are in conversations with, there's an element now of time.
Yes.
We are starting to see that some of the real estate professionals have now got more time than they've ever had because they're at home. And they're sitting there with much more efficient timescales. And therefore, they're able to sort of give the time and the thought process to these companies. So, if Proptechs have access to people, there is a lot more feedback available for them, which is another interesting side of it all. But, someone has said to me, what's the difference between, South America and Africa and Europe? And, surely there's a difference. And the thing is, there's not. And this is the uniqueness of this situation. Every single one of us is in exactly the same situation.
Yeah.
And that is so strange and so unique in the sense of all phone calls start off with exactly the same thing. How are you getting on? Are you okay?
Yeah.
Never has there been a more empathetic audience than there is at the minute.
Yeah, exactly. Let's just pause there for a moment and hear a quick word from our sponsors. As we all know, the problems of the world can always be solved with good company and good wine. And for a truly great wine, check out Smidge Wines from the McLaren Vale in South Australia. Smidge Wines has been rated 5 red stars by the James Halliday Australian Wine Companion since 2017. Whether you love a big bold Shiraz, a beautiful well-rounded Cabernet Sauvignon, or a Montepulciano, a Tempranillo, or a Fiano, check out smidgewines.com. Sold exclusively online and proud to be official wine of Australian Proptech. So do you think the pandemic is helping or hurting the adoption of tech in the real estate sector?
Is it helping or hurting? I think ultimately it's helping. Because, and this is where there's a geographical difference, because if you look at, why did we start up as a business in the first place? We started because we realized there was going to be an adoption from every single real estate company in the world at some point using technology. Yep. In America, in Europe, the adoption was slightly faster. They're in the sort of the starting point of technological adoption. It's a 7 to 10 year process in terms of understanding mentality, understanding the competitive business models, understanding change, and then ultimately implementing technology. But that was the US and Europe. It was at the start of the journey, and that's where we felt Unissu was well placed so we could help them. What we also realized was the likes of some, further flung economies were going to be slightly later to the game in the sense of their education of, what technology meant. Take Africa, for example, and the many times I've been out there. Proptech to them is just making sure that they've got a bloody Wi-Fi signal that is constant. And that they've got connections into their homes. And we laugh, but that is their serious point. The innovations are fundamentally simple. It's, can I have a computer system to run my CRM on? It's not what CRM, it's what computer system do I use? So, there was always a disparity between developing and developed worlds when it came to Proptech. What we're now finding in current situation that we've got is everybody is grouped together. They're trying to find technological ways of doing their business. And it doesn't matter that you're based in Africa or America. The whole nature of connecting with people to try to facilitate business decisions, everybody is doing the same thing. So all of a sudden, this whole, the regions of the world are bunching together in trying to adopt technology like never before.
Yeah.
So I think it's accelerated growth in developed worlds. Of course it has. And I think this whole resistance, and let me just explain that in the developed world, you've got the friction between intention and action around technology is a mentality thing, which is we don't need to do anything differently because we're okay at the minute. Thank you very much. So the mentality is shifted to, Christ, if we're going to do what we've always done, we've got to adopt technology. In the developing worlds, the mentality has always been there. You know, we want to progress, we want to change, we want to fail and find a new way of doing things because that's the way that we've always done it. So in their cases, actually what the pandemic is doing is hastening the adoption through to more infrastructure and sort of a physical aspect of the technology, not the mental aspect of the technology. So everybody's bunched in at the same time. It's a fascinating sort of melting pot of adoption, which we will see what happens when it all hopefully and eventually subsides. I think we'll be a totally different industry when it happens.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. Do you think now, before you talked about the cashed up, or the Proptechs that have got good investment sitting behind them, and those that are struggling, the kind of haves and the have-nots of the cash world, I guess. How do you think what's going on now is going to affect the arc of Proptech and the arc of development? Because it was, the sector was going at such a cracking pace. Do you think that's going to slow down, or how do you think that's going to shake out?
I think there's going to be an inevitable slowdown. Something again that I think we've discussed it before. We've always said there's going to be a consolidation of the sector.
Yeah.
In certain industries, there has just been a crazy amount of sort of development around this, and in a lot of places, people have been very critical of Proptech and saying, it's solving problems that simply don't exist, because you've got technologists who are coming into the property sector who don't understand the property sector, but they've understood one small aspect of their own personal journey in, renting an office or selling a flat. And therefore they're creating solutions to problems that don't exist. So, we've often said that there's going to be consolidation. I think we're going to find that now. I think there's going to be an awful lot of failure. And, not necessarily because their business model has failed, but just because they've run out of capital and it's gone. Yeah. And they don't get the opportunity to explore their ideas. And it's going to be a shame. And I think that the traditional real estate market should be a little bit upset about that. And I do think there is no better time for the traditional real estate market to, take a look at the arc, as you put it, that was happening beforehand, to realize that ultimately it's not going to change the adoption. And there's no better time than now for the traditional markets to start looking at the arcs within the arc, as it were, to look at the different technologies and the different models that were being created, to ask itself the question, we've been screwed by COVID-19. The way that we operate our business has been completely messed up. So how are we going to adopt a technology or a methodology or a business model that will safeguard us in the future to sort of, let's call it flatten the arc, as we're sort of flattening the COVID-19 spread, to sort of stop that sort of crash, as it were.
Do you think this was do you think in the real estate space that this was the crisis we needed to have to get more traditional real estate operators to embrace technology? I mean, it is virtually impossible right now in Australia to conduct a real estate business if you have to only be in your office with other people sitting on a legacy system.
Oh, come on. And look, please tell me that story we did just before, because this is all getting a bit serious and I want you to talk. Come on. That fascinating example, because you know the answer to this. And that example you gave about the legacy systems was a fascinating one.
Yeah, well, what a handful of friends and I in the tech space all took a look at what our platforms were doing in terms of where our users were using us from, and the integrations that we were being asked to do through CRMs and things like that. And we came up with a number that was, as good as we could get, which was at about 65% of our users were running us off desktop platforms. And in fact, a good proportion of those were running us separately to CRMs or had like minimal integration because their CRMs wouldn't integrate. So what we see in that is that the industry has, and when you compared that to market share of some of the legacy CRMs, because they had dominated for a long time, you could see that that the majority of the industry is using quite old technology to do its day-to-day work. And a little side note, which we didn't get to talk about, is that actually the biggest CRM in the space for quite a while has actually just been bought by one of the more modern, newest ones, and is now going to be cannibalized to upgrade everybody that's on that system. So I think we will see, stronger adoption generally into cloud-based stuff. But yeah.
Well, maybe that's the answer, which is, what we're going to see as a stepping stone. Do I think this is the answer to absolute mass adoption and acceptance of technology use? No, not in a million years. Is it going to be a stepping stone into propelling it forward? Yes. Things that people understand are going to be now accelerated. So, take the growth of, I don't know, the easiest one that comes to mind is, 360-degree virtual viewing platforms.
Yeah. Yep.
There is a raft of how do we implement this in our business today, because otherwise we're going to fail. And so there is a need and a must that they have to sort of implement that. And that's commercial, retail and resi have adopted that very quickly. So that's your first stepping stone, which is there is a need for that right now. And I think that will continue because they will, that resistance between the intention and the action, which I keep on coming back to, is going to be absolutely gone. Do I need to be physically in a building to show somebody around? Absolutely, you don't necessarily. And my point has always been there's a fundamental inefficiency within our real estate industry. Mm. And, that some things like that are such a no-brainer because there's little or no cost involved. It's good for both sides. It's a very efficient process and I don't think the buying or leasing of buildings will necessarily happen because of a virtual viewing. But I do think the process of speeding up those that are definite no's will be wheedled out, which will save on all time for everybody to go and view the houses they want, or definitely go and view the offices they want. And it means that we're all more efficient, both on the real estate side and also on the client side. So that's the first stepping stone. The second stepping stone, you mentioned CRMs. Again, absolutely. These legacy systems which aren't set up for a new way of working, there's going to be a process before the widespread adoption, which is going to be, okay, we need to take a long, hard look at our systems and work out how we improve them. So the real estate industry is going to have to review this period of time with an absolute fine-tooth comb to work out what can we do better because the market's going to change. And then that adoption of certain systems will be far faster. Whether that be legacy systems or not, I don't know. There's a lot of trust. And what we're seeing, especially from a procurement side, is when you've got larger real estate firms looking to procure technology solutions, often they look for established businesses which have got good cash flow, which have got good systems, which can, help them and support them. And they sort of veer away from more growth or agile-based businesses. And we're quite lucky to have something called a Uniscore, which allows us to sort of give a community-driven metric on how well adopted and how innovative a certain solution is, which allows us to guide the real estate companies to say, this is an established business or this is a growth stage business. And what I think we might find is the risk profiling from the larger real estate companies dropping slightly out of that more, we must have an established business, to actually, they probably don't suit our way of working now. So let's look at slightly newer, more growth businesses or, very well adopted and innovative businesses that we can take in. So I think we'll move that sort of CRM needle will be a little bit more, businesses will take a bit more of a risk profiling. But then there's more sort of deep tech, which I do think will still take time, the AIs of this world, because they are not frontline real estate services. They are going to be needing of a lot more understanding, a lot more education before they start getting adopted in use cases. So it will speed up adoption, but it won't be everybody at the same time. It'll be a stepping stone over the next couple of years, but it will definitely speed up.
Yeah, it won't. It won't be mono. The speed that it goes at. It's going to depend what sort of sector you're in. So I reckon the UK is probably about 3 to 4 weeks ahead of Australia in terms of COVID-19 issues. How's the real estate market affected? How's it been affected in the UK? Like, what have we got to look forward to? She says, laughing from stress.
Well, I mean, I can't give you the absolute detail simply because I'm not on the front line anymore. And if I'm brutally honest, Kylie, I'm quite pleased I'm not. You know, I think one of the things that we're definitely seeing is that the portals are being absolutely slammed. In terms from a volume. Residential side, let's focus on that. Well, in terms of volume, but actually, volume in which way?
Transaction volume.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So from transaction volume, yes. But funnily enough, you know, what I would call property porn is huge at the minute. You know, people are stuck inside and they want to look at different properties. And so, you know, the feedback we're getting, and this isn't just UK, but European wide, is, you know, viewing figures of properties is doing well and holding up. And in a lot of cases, the sort of the thought, and there's no basis of this, is that people stuck in homes are now in the position to really analyze what they want from their home. And it sounds a bizarre thing, but for once, all the families are in one place and, oh God, this is actually a bit small for us, isn't it? And you know, I'd love to live somewhere bigger or with a garden because I've just, you know, what can I do? I've got nothing. I can't move.
That's right. Need vegetables. Need to grow my own vegetables for the next pandemic.
But that's the irony of this situation, which is it is making people and forcing people to look at their perspectives and say, well, what do I need? So there is an aspect from the portal side which is saying we definitely need to reflect on where we're going. So I think they're quite happy, but there is a significant push back from the real estate industry to portals, which ultimately, let's be honest, portals are a little bit like crack cocaine for the real estate industry on the resi side, which is they don't want to have to be dependent on the portals, but they are. And you know what? Some of the portals have made huge mistakes over here, is that they are initially, they didn't really do anything to help out their agents. They just kept on with payments. They might have set up deferred payment schemes, which got absolutely slammed. So we started to have a little bit of a portal war in the UK in this time in particular, where, you know, the sort of the second and the third place portal made a very, very big run on the first place one by saying, look, we're just not going to charge you for X period of time, or we're going to give you a 30% discount for X period of time. And so there's been a really interesting dynamic, sort of making this a little bit shorter than me just waffling on about it, in terms of the agents pushing back to the portals and just saying, do you know what? We don't need you. You're not going to give us anything at the minute because nobody's buying. We're just cutting all of our subscriptions.
Right.
So there is there's an interesting move there for sure.
So the UK portal business model is the advertising / listing subscription model. It's not the lead generation model like the US have.
It's a mixture, really. There's so many convoluted ways of sort of working on the subscription modeling. But you know, one thing is for sure: every single year, without fail, the pricing for all portal subscriptions for members to list a number of properties, and there are other ancillary, ways of lead generation and advertising and all this sort of stuff. Which, you know, there's no one size fits all in our portal markets. But the only thing that is a definite constant is prices keep on going up every single year, which is why it's like heroin. The agents cannot afford to leave, but they're now at the point of saying this is the protagonist for us to ask questions. They still won't leave because at the minute there isn't necessarily a viable alternative. But I think, you know, the traditional real estate market is now in that position where they are taking time to reflect on their business models and saying, what do we need to change to make ourselves a viable business? Because at the minute we're not.
Yeah. No, look, I suspect, I can see similar rumblings happening back here as well. Let's just pause there for a moment and hear a quick word from our sponsors. As a real estate agent, you know you need to be doing more content marketing. But creating posts for social media, creating videos and reports is hard work, lots of hard work, and it takes time. So that's why you need HomePrezo. If you're a typical agent posting 1 or 2 social media posts a week, HomePrezo can save you between 75 to 100 hours a year. How many more properties could you sell if you had that time back? HomePrezo can help you create engaging, informative videos about how the property market in your local suburb is performing. Plus, it makes creating suburb reports, rental videos for landlords, and social media infographics an absolute piece of cake. If you can type in a suburb or type an address, you can create a Prezo using HomePrezo in just a few minutes. Listeners to the Proptech podcast receive a 14-day free trial. Now that's twice as long as the normal free trial. So go to homeprezo.com.au and click the sign up button and use the code Proptech to get your extended free trial. Or click the link in our show notes. So let's talk about funding. We sort of touched on it a little bit before. How do you think the pandemic and what's going on now is going to affect VC funding for Proptech?
There's no question it's going to drop.
Yep.
And I think, let me just say, I think there's a real difference here between VC funding and other forms like angel funding and family offices and all this sort of stuff. Because I think the VCs, quite rightly, everybody has got their own personal agenda at this time. And this is where, we're all in this together. Mm-hmm. So general VCs, which are built on the premise of you're playing with other people's money. Yep. It doesn't mean, I could be speaking out of term here, it doesn't mean as much to them to deploy other people's capital. I think they're going to be focusing on other things.
They're a dispassionate
We're also going to see, totally. And therefore they're going to look after themselves for a bit. And secondly, I think those who are investing in the market, I'm hearing horror stories of, desperate founders of tech businesses having valuations absolutely slashed because quite simply, they are more desperate and the investors are a dispassionate bunch.
Yeah.
So, I think we're really starting to see the true capitalist nature of VC funding at the minute. And it's a true sign, I think, that unless you're a business that is generating revenue, unless you're a business that has generated product market fit, you are going to struggle for a considerable amount of time. And it's not just because you're pre-revenue, but I think it's also the fact that you are coming into a time where so many people will be looking to raise money that the supply and demand challenges, let alone anything else, are going to be completely in a very sort of situation which the odds are against you as a raising business. I think on a family office and an angel side, I don't think that's going to change too much. I think there has been and there will be a small blip, which is, oh God, this has happened. And when those angels and the people it's actually their money that they're deploying, I think that there's going to be this sort of month blip while they get used to the new normal. They then realize that this is now how it is.
Yep.
And they're in a better position to deploy their own capital. So I don't think that's going to change significantly is my view. And also may I say corporate money, the corporate VC side, I think is stuck somewhere in between the two, where they want to invest in companies which will impact their business, and they will probably be a little bit later to deploying capital, and they might have to make a slightly bigger use case for why it's going to impact their business. But like we've already discussed, the real estate industry needs to change. There's no better time to consider it now. So it's a story of 3 different groups, I think.
Yeah. What do you think is going to happen in the commercial space? Do you think this whole working from home is going to lead us all to question why in God's name we all spend so much time on public transport or in cars trying to turn up to an office for a set number of hours a week? And what's that going to do to...
I can't call it.
Or not wait to get back to work so we can get away from our children. I don't know.
But you laugh, but I think that's quite serious. I do genuinely think that, and that's why I can't really call it because the sort of the thought leader in me says this is absolutely what everybody was looking for to justify why flexible working was needed.
Yeah.
So again, I don't think we're going to see a one size fits all. I think we're going to find some people want to and can work from home. I think we're going to find some people who genuinely, even if they haven't got kids or parents at home who are going to nag them, are going to struggle with the work environment in their home. They just haven't got that discipline to do it. And I think that's going to struggle. But I do genuinely think there's a particular age gap, probably between the ages, I don't know, of 25 and 55, who just can't do it. Because we're all assuming, and this is the other assumption that people are making, that people think that they're well set up to work from home.
Yeah.
They're probably not going to be, because they may not have home computers they can work off of. They may, in the event of them having a family, they just haven't got a room to spare to work outside of their family environment.
Yeah.
So there is a real societal thing here, not just on a business level. Are they set up to work from home? Can they work from home with family around them all the time? So I can't call this one. What I do think is that it's going to shake it all up. What I do think is the co-working spaces in the short term are going to really struggle. We've already started to see that. WeWork are renegotiating their leases, which, the stock market has always said will be a critical point. If WeWork have to renegotiate leases, they're screwed. So I do think there's going to be a short-term struggle for co-working. I think long-term, it's more viable. The flexible aspect of working, I think, is going to be more viable. And let's flip this a little bit on its head in terms of how is this going to impact the work-life balance. One of the things that I'm definitely seeing, and I'm fascinated to see it, is not only are we starting to see, and I'm sure you see it as well on LinkedIn in particular, I must have seen hundreds, if not thousands, of people posting pictures of matrices of people on webinars.
Yes.
Almost sort of saying how proud they are to be able to host meetings with 20 people. That's a passing fad in my view, but it does show that a lot of people who are not technology enabled beforehand are now becoming technology enabled. So they're showing that they can work from home or have a more flexible work-life balance, and it works. But the other aspect of this, which I'm finding fascinating, not only are we becoming more technology enabled, but we're also becoming more traditionally enabled. We've got in so many people that I'm seeing on my more personal network sort of baking bread and making pasta and doing things that they've never done before, DIY. I think we're upskilling both in technology but also in tradition, which is something I wholeheartedly think will improve our work-life balance.
I don't think there's a safe banana in Australia at the moment. There's a risk of every banana in the country being turned into banana bread. Everyone's baking like buggery. I think you do it for comfort too, don't you?
But that's great though. Too right. And we do it to pass, in the terms of if you're a parent, we do it to pass that knowledge and experience to our children. And they will remember this time. There is no way about it. And we are in a time now where society can really bring back what it had and not just get used to the status quo of everybody doing everything for you. We're having to become self-sustainable again, maybe for the first time. And I think in terms of, looking at this from a business commercial perspective, it's going to change things. We will become more flexible. We'll become more adaptable as a society to understanding how work is not the defining point of we have to be there at 9 and we have to leave at 5 or 6 or wherever you leave. But we're also going to find that adaptability within our home lives and our family lives, which will change. And I think there'll be an increased importance on, not just a screen time all the time, but, cooking as a family and sitting down as a family, because I hope, and this is a rather idealistic notion, that most families have started to enjoy each other's company again, because they've got to that point, which we always try encouraging our kids, which is, let the kids be bored for a period of time, because creativity is a result of that. And that, I hope, is what's happening as a family, which is they get so bored of each other, they get so bored of fighting, of squabbling, that actually you get back to playing board games and you get back to baking and you get back to eating as a family and not just, sitting in front of the black mirror of a screen in front of us and just getting absorbed by it. So there's an idealistic notion to that, but there's also quite hopefully a realistic output that we all have as a society.
And I think what's going on at the moment too is this return to the idea of the safety of home, isn't it, too? And how, home is where the heart is, and that when the world is going crazy, you need to be home or be with the people that you love, and try and cocoon yourself against it, rather than where our lives were going, which was constantly external, out all the time. Yeah, interesting. So what do you reckon what does the next 5 days hold for Proptech or the real estate industry? But what do you reckon the next 5 years? What's on the horizon getting through this? What do you think's on the horizon?
I think it's a very simple answer. I think it's there won't be such a thing as Proptech. Really, what we should all be doing, and you guys with the association in Australia, we should be getting to a point where Proptech isn't a thing. It's just a more technology-enabled real estate business.
Yeah.
And technology is an integral part of that. And really, we should be looking for a seamless integration of technology and work practices and methodologies that, it's just a more efficient property business. That's it.
It's the end of us and them.
Totally. I think this is beginning to open up that opportunity that there isn't a them and us. It is we're all in this together and we're all trying to help each other.
Yeah.
Christ, I'm idealistic, but it's terrible, isn't it? But yeah, there shouldn't be such a distinction between that.
Yeah.
We need to realize that this is digital transformation. Yes. And that we've got different minds trying to solve the same problems. Some will fail, some will work, but this is the time for the traditional industry simply to try to understand these new business models, because that will be a part of their working life in over the next 5 years for sure.
Absolutely. And so what does the future hold for Unissu? What's on your radar?
Oh, God knows. Who knows? Who knows what happens? But, I suppose in some sense, let's use a bit of marketing speak here, on the very top of the funnel for us. We want to try and educate every single property professional around the world with our Connect series, working in collaboration with people all over the world to record the very best educative content that will try and ensure that every single real estate professional around the world watches at least one of our videos, because if they are more engaged and more educated in this sector, then it's going to help them. So I think top of the funnel, it's about education. Bottom of the funnel, for us, it's very much about helping every single property company around the world procure the right solution for them. And rather than making an expensive mistake in some cases, and just jump on the bandwagon of Proptech, and because somebody's knocking on their door, they adopt their solution. We want to make sure that we can help them with their particular problem to find the exact solution for them. So, they're the sort of the top level thoughts for me in terms of, what can Unissu do for the industry and what can we do for partners all around the world. Personally, I just hope I can pay my bills next month.
Yes,
it's as simple as that.
It's end of quarter here in Australia, and it's an end of a tax quarter, so I made sure I paid everything today, and sucked it in and went, oh, okay, better get it all done, and then made sure the mortgages were covered and felt good after it, and also said a little prayer to the money god that it happens again next month. But James, so
oh man, I need a money god. That'd be great. I want one of them.
Yeah,
we've got to have this money tree in our society at the minute, with all the sort of the politicians and political parties managing to
giving it a good shake
money from anywhere. Oh man! And I tell you what, though, Kylie, that it worries me, because the inevitable is the fact that if they can pay out these trillions of dollars, which is going to happen, and bail out everybody, we're in for a tough time. But yes, us technologists need to realize that it's generally during recessions that alternatives to the status quo are adopted. So, this is the time for technology to be the winner, I think.
Yeah, to lean in.
I hope.
Well, James, it's been a fantastic conversation. Thank you so much. We've been going for nearly an hour now, so I'm gonna wrap it up.
We are going to bore the people on your podcast rigid.
No, I'm sure they found it fascinating. Thank you so much, and hopefully, when all of this is over, we'll see you back in Australia for a beer.
Oh man, I want to be out in September again.
So that was James Dearsley, co-founder of Unissu, and I really loved having that conversation with him. It really cheered me up after a couple of absolutely insane days. Now, James has made some great observations about the way Proptech is likely to be affected by the virus and how it's going to change funding and impact especially on startups. But I especially loved his observations around how COVID-19 is changing our appreciation of home and how it's helping us to reconnect to what's important. And I really love his vision to democratise sharing information around Proptech. And personally, I love taking part in Connect, even if it did traumatise me slightly. So check out the Connect presentations. The links are included in the show notes below. Now, if you've enjoyed this episode of the Proptech podcast, I would love you to tell your friends or drop me a line either via email, LinkedIn, or on my Facebook page. You can follow the podcast on Spotify, Google Podcasts, Anchor, and Apple iTunes. And I think we're a few other spots too now. I'd like to thank my audio support, Charlie Hollins, and the fabulous Jill Escudero, and our sponsors, Smidge Wines, proud to be the official wine of Australian Proptech, and Home Prezzo, turning your data into amazing marketing content, which has never been more important in these days of social isolation. So thanks everyone so much. Until next week, stay safe and keep on Propteching.